Sometimes people think of the sacredness of sex as like just everything's like quiet and stodgy. I'm not sure. It's sort of somehow like
Uh-huh.
boring is makes it spiritual
Right.
rather than the sacredness of me at this deep level that we can enjoy and accept ourselves in this way with one another, value each other in this deep way.
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. If you're new to the Get Your Marriage On podcast, I want to give you a warm welcome. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a marriage, intimacy, and sex coach. My wife, Emily, and I have been married for nearly 20 years. We have 6 children and started Get Your Marriage On as a place to share with others the things we were learning as we strive to strengthen our marriage or the marriages of those that we coach. We've created the popular Intimately Us and Just Between Us apps also. In addition to this podcast and our apps, we have a coaching program for couples called Next Level. We also put on marriage retreats and events. The most important thing you need to know about us is that we are on a mission to help couples have mind-blowing sex and a strong, intimate bond in their marriage. Many of our podcast episodes are interviews with guests. I often invite my guests to share what I call a black belt sex tip. The idea for this comes from my own martial arts training I did for 13 years, and it applies to building a great sexual relationship with your spouse in your marriage too. It's that there's always going to be a next level. Your growth never stops. You must master the basics before enjoying the higher level tactics and training. So this is episode number 150, and I want to give you a roundup of the best black belt sex tips that my guests have taught me over the last 50 episodes. It's geared towards couples that have mastered the basics and are ready for their next level. Now, today is also the first day of September, and for Emily and I, it is the start of Sextember. This is when you get to spend a whole month with you and your spouse with the goal of drawing together emotionally, physically, and spiritually. We want to encourage all couples listening to this podcast to identify 1 or 2 things that are usually getting in the way of their intimacy and proactively make a plan to work on it for the month of September. And you can participate in this challenge by using the Intimately Us app or a printable calendar on our blog. How it works is you and your spouse have the whole month of September, and you get to pick and choose what items you want to complete for every day in September. If you complete 20 out of 30 of those days, you get entered into a drawing for some amazing prizes that we have from some very generous partners and sponsors for the Sextember Challenge. So I invite you and your spouse to make that plan, download the Intimately Us app, open it, and go ahead and start scheduling all the wonderful things that you want to do to connect better in the month of September. We also have just a few openings left for our October Marriage and Intimacy Retreat in Granbury, Texas, which is just outside of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's limited to about 20 couples only. You get to spend 4 days and 3 nights with your sweetheart, receive great instruction, enjoy good company, taste excellent food, participate in fun activities, and enjoy beautiful surroundings. Besides, we take you on a deep dive into your relationship to help you unlock your next level to a closer and more intimate relationship and better sex in your relationship. You can sign up by going to getyourmarriageon.com, which is our website, click on retreats, and then click October 23 retreat. My first black belt sex tip comes from episode number 121 with my guest, Ashley. This episode is what I call a sextimony. A sextimony is when a guest kind of shares their experience of their sexual growth and journey. Ashley shares her struggles with reaching orgasm after years of marriage and after feeling like she had tried everything to no avail. She shared her story about how one coaching call guided her with hope and ideas and helped her finally enjoy the pleasure she was seeking in her marriage. Her tip is to focus on psychological arousal as well as physical arousal.
One of the things that you'd suggested and others suggested as well was romance novels and erotic fiction. And I'd never really tried it before. I'd had some books where I'd read some sex scenes and stuff, and I kind of enjoyed them, but it felt like it was veering a little bit too much into pornography and things like that. And then, as you and I had talked about it, it was having this mindset of, well, if it's helping me be intimate with my husband rather than being an escape, then it can be beneficial.
Mhm.
And so I'd had a friend who loved romance novels and asked for some recommendations from her. And so she recommended a particular series to me. And so I picked that up on my Kindle for our anniversary getaway that
Mhm.
we were having. So my husband had a work trip out in California. And so I went and visited him so that we could have a kind of couples vacation together at that time. And on the plane, I went ahead and started reading these books, and they were quite arousing. There were some pretty like, very quickly, I got into some quite, sensual sex scenes. Well, I guess all sex scenes are sensual, but they're very explicit, and they were quite enjoyable, and it got me quite aroused. But I wasn't able to see my husband for about an hour and a half. I was going, "Oh, I guess," so I was hot and bothered for about an hour and a half to 2 hours before I was able to actually act on anything, because 'cause I'm in the middle of a plane while I'm reading this. And so I did let my husband know, "By the way, when I get there, you're gonna need to be ready in the hotel room. We're not gonna see anyone. I need you," kinda thing. And so as we were in there, basically jumped in there because I was very ready as a result of reading this. And then he started touching me in a little bit different way than I was used to. And I was like, "Oh, that feels really good." And he kind of kept going. I kept encouraging him to do that. And then suddenly the orgasm happened. It was I could feel the shaking in my legs and my body contorting, and I suddenly was screaming, which I've never screamed in sex before. And it was like, "Oh, okay. So this is what it's like." And, you know, and it was very obvious to him that I was having an orgasm. So that was an exciting moment. The other thing, and to help me learn very quickly with this, is a lot of advice is have your muscles more tight and contracted, close your legs, or maybe if you kind of feel like you need to pee, you can most often happen if you kind of feel like you need to pee before sex. For me, that just was distracting. It didn't help. I found for myself needing to open up and relax and kind of lean into the feelings and the sensations. That was helpful to me. So that's the other thing is just some of the common advice may not work for you. If you feel like it feels good, then lean into that and it can be helpful. So, yeah, that was kind of the main things there, and being able to figure it out, it's like, "Okay, that felt really good." And then once especially the motion, because direct stimulation of my clitoris isn't very good, but going around was what really helped me there. And once we figured out that, then we were able to then start figuring out how to replicate it.
That's cool. My next two tips come from licensed marriage and family therapists. The first is from Tony Overbay, a therapist in the California Bay Area, and was my guest on episode number 122. His black belt sex tip is about working on what's below the surface in your marriage by being committed to being honest with your spouse. And I like what he taught me here.
The healthy ego is when one feels really differentiated. Now my wife can say, "Hey, I'm noticing this," or "I kind of feel like this is what I'm seeing in the relationship." And from a healthy ego, I can with confidence say thank you because I want to be better. So I can self confront because from this healthy ego, I do feel confident about the things I know because I'm putting in the work. But that does mean that I can also be emotionally mature enough to then take a look at the things that I'm unaware of because that might be an opportunity for growth.
Oh, that's good because it takes a degree of willingness to commit to the truth, whatever it
Yeah.
might be, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I want to know what's really going on, even if it puts me in a bad light or I feel uncomfortable about it. Like, there's a new Imagine Dragons song. It's like, I'm okay with not being okay. Dr. Corey Allen, the therapist from McKinney, Texas, and host of the popular Passionately Married podcast, shares this tip from episode number 118.
I think first off, you recognize that most everything in life is survivable, particularly relationally speaking,
Hmm.
because I can learn some things about myself that I get a tremendous opportunity that to really see what could be.
Hmm.
Because the things that we really fight for, we value
Hmm.
more, particularly when we go through them. If things are coming easy to us, they're dismissed real simply because there's no value associated with it really.
Hmm.
So it's just one is recognize that I can survive this. Two, recognize you're not alone.
Hmm.
There are people that have gone through it, are going through it, or will go through it. So find some allies, make sure they're the same gender as you.
Mhm.
Not that you're finding somebody to badmouth your spouse, but
Mm-mm.
just somebody that's in your corner, somebody that'll
Mhm.
listen to you, somebody that'll speak truth to you, help you see something, to challenge something if necessary. Usually a therapist or a coach or somebody professional is fantastic help
Mhm.
in that path. And then the others, I keep coming back to this. My wife and I use this regularly, is, would I want to be married to me?
Mhm.
Because if I shore that up and I make it a yes as much as possible, I present something that's really worth being with and of value to choose. And I hope
Mhm.
my partner's got good judgment to want to choose it, because I
Mhm.
can't force their hand. I mean, I've seen lots of different people that are so desperate for their spouse to stay after something went wrong.
Mhm.
They, unbeknownst to themselves, were pushing them away with their desperation
Right, right.
rather
Sometimes
than
yeah.
taking the risk to see. Because if you convince somebody to stay, you've never really let them to choose.
Mhm. Right, right. A lot of times we want to eliminate our spouse's choices, so they only have us to choose left,
Right.
but then there's
Which
no
that sounds so inviting and exciting and invigorating,
but then
doesn't
there's
it?
no
It's, "Oh,
choice.
well, if all you got is me, I guess you
Uh-huh.
better make the most of it." It's like, "Come on, really? That's not calling us to more and better."
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. It's like, when I was 17 years old, I won an international karate tournament. I did a lot of martial arts as a youth. It was in Las Vegas. People from all over the world were there, and I got first place. But what you don't know is I was the only person in my division.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got really lucky. I had no opponents that day or anything. So how valuable is that to me? When there's
Right,
when you eliminate all your other choices, yeah,
right.
right, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, that's funny.
Brian is a friend of mine that has experienced tremendous growth in his marriage. He calls himself a recovering nice guy that had a really bad sex life before. However, he put in a lot of work to improve himself, and now he and his wife have a very passionate sex life and a rewarding marriage. He shares his sextimony and offers his black belt sex tip in episode 116.
My black belt sex tip would be that when you're doing things for your wife, do them for the right reason. Don't do it because you're expecting sex. Do it because you are kind, you're loving, and it's the right thing to do. I mean, it's the right thing to do to help with the dishes, to help with the cleaning, to do your share of of the work around the house. And so one day my wife told me, she said, "Oh, I love a made bed." And in the past, I always thought, why make the bed? You're just going to mess it up again. No one's going to see it, so who cares? But when she said, "I love a made bed," then I decided, okay, I'm going to make the bed every day. And I've started doing that, and I love doing it. I love doing that for her. And as I'm making the bed, I'm not thinking, "Oh, okay. Oh, well, I'm gonna get sex because I'm making the bed." I'm thinking, "I love my wife, I'm serving her, and I love doing this for her." And the amazing thing is that I do get plenty in return. And I mean, I get a lot in return now, and it's way better than our system before.
One thing about me is that I read a lot of marriage and sex related books. Lara Torrent is a couples therapist and author of the book, The Practice of Love. His book was incredible and made a big impact on me. So I invited him to be a guest on my podcast, and he shared many of the principles you can find in his book on episode 114. His black belt sex tip is as follows.
One of the quickest ways to turn that around is to practice gratitude and to, in the morning when you wake up or at night before you go to bed or both throughout the day, just think about things that you are grateful for with regard to your partner. Now, it can't just be a laundry list. It has to be a felt sense of what they do or who they are or the way they move in the world that changes your chemicals in your body for a moment
Right,
and makes you
right.
actually feel gratitude or love or warmth for them.
Hmm.
That's when the practice really gets powerful.
Yeah, it can't be just perfunctory. I
Mhm.
said thank you. It's not that. It's
You're
you feel it.
nice. You're
Yeah.
sweet. You're good to the
Uh,
kids. Um, you're a great dad. You're a good provider. You're a great mom. You
uh,
know,
yeah.
yeah, no. Mm-mm.
as you say those things, your facial expressions betrays what you're saying.
Right.
Very
Yeah.
exactly. That's
Right.
not gratitude.
No. No, no, no. It's perfunctory. It's just sort of on the list of like things I know I should say. But when you really step into it and you're like, man, I'm just so grateful for all the things she does for us or the way she handles me when I'm at my worst, the way she or he shows up for me when I'm down, I always know I have my ride or die. It's like when you start thinking about those things, we tend to think about them when someone gets sick or you get a note from the doctor that says, hey, can you give us a call back? Right? We need to go in for another thing. And then you start thinking about the fact that, like, there's going to come a day. And then we get real thankful and we get real grateful for a few
Right.
days and
Yes.
life comes back in.
And hopefully it
Yeah.
stays for a long time.
Well,
Right.
listen, you have to practice. That's why I called the book The Practice of Love, because that denotes the idea that this is something that you must pay attention to all of the time. Love has fallen into the bin of things that we should just know how to do and we don't.
Right. Right.
And
It
so,
is practice.
yeah. And so there will come a day, every day we spend with our partner. And I don't mean to say that we can live every day as if it's our last. That's not practical. But I do think we need to consider the fact that that's one more day that we don't have with them. And when you start thinking about it that way, you can go, wow, man, it's important to become grateful yesterday. It's
Yes.
important to feel connected yesterday. It's important to have compassion, empathy, and understanding now. And that's really at the heart of the practice of love.
One of our most highly downloaded podcast episodes of all time is number 112 with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife as my guest. She is a marriage coach that I admire a lot and learn a lot from personally. She shares the following black belt sex tip here.
Maybe exposing to your spouse something about your erotic mind that you've maybe been afraid to talk to them about because
Mhm.
you feel bashful, or or tell them something that you would like to do that you've been afraid of the invalidation. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that your spouse will be like, "Fantastic." I mean, they may be like,
Uh-huh.
"Fantastic." Okay.
Well, there's a reason why you're not doing it now.
Right,
So there's
exactly.
probably
Exactly. It's like
Uh-huh.
some of the difficulty with intimacy. It's some of the
Yes.
difficulty with keeping the marriage knowable and honest. But
Mhm.
it it does two things. It brings, the best sexual relationships, in my opinion, are able to hold the two things that human beings want. We want safety or security, we wanna belong, and we
Mhm.
want novelty and freedom. And a lot of marriages are in one direction or the other. That is, that
Mhm.
it's all about safety and there's no freedom or novelty. The sex is boring. It's like it's Tuesday, it's always the same position, right? Or it errs too much in the area of freedom, like the shackles of this marriage are destroying my sexual energy, and so they actually, like, destroy the foundation of the marriage in the attempt to have novelty. And so in the best marriages, there's this ability to find this, like, I'm committed, but we will bring novelty about who we are. We'll keep growing as a partnership, right? That we value this partnership enough to keep it full of life and truth and newness. Now, not in a way that undermines the couple, but just even to know aspects of yourself that you didn't let yourself know before, or you hadn't yet developed, or you hadn't shared with your spouse.
Is
I
excellent.
tell this story sometimes, but because it was just so that my husband and I were separated for 3 weeks because of travel schedules.
Mhm.
But, I just decided, a couple weeks in, he called me and he just was really emotionally intimate. He just said some things to me about how grateful he was for the marriage and how much he loved me. And John's a quiet guy, so it wasn't like usual to hear kind of that level.
Mhm. It was
And it
meaningful.
was very meaningful. It was very
Mhm.
intimate. Um,
Mhm.
he was somewhat sexual in the way he was talking to me too. And so that night I just thought, I'm just going to send him a picture of myself. Now, that was scary for me to do because I'd never done it before. I wasn't
Mhm.
certain that he was going to think that was a good idea. I was also, it was like seeing myself in a different way or
Mhm.
being with him in a different way. Okay, well, the short story of this longer thing of another week of amazingness
Uh-huh.
before he came home was that it just, like, opened up a whole different realm between us of seeing myself, experiencing myself with him in a different way, experiencing him in a different way. This was all remote, but he's writing erotic poetry to me. There's like this whole supercharged experience. But why it was supercharged is because we were stepping into a new way of being together.
Mhm.
We were not just in the you're my husband, what are the kids' schedules way of being, but more like you're a man and I'm a woman, and we are showing aspects of ourselves to each other that we haven't before. And it made the marriage feel alive at a much deeper level. It made each of us feel alive at a different level. And so there was tremendous novelty while still a deep safety of the commitment of the marriage. Sometimes people think of the sacredness of sex as like just everything's like quiet and stodgy. I'm not sure. It's sort of somehow like
Uh-huh.
boring is makes it spiritual
Right.
rather than the sacredness of me at this deep level that we can enjoy and accept ourselves in this way with one another, n-
Mhm.
value each other in this deep way. I mean, I think in this story that I told about me and John was there was this like deep, deep valuing that was highly sexual, but it was a deep form of choosing. So it was interesting in how it was both felt so alive and so secure at the same time.
Mhm.
And it's just like a beautiful place to create as a couple.
After being married to your spouse for a while, you develop familiar patterns and scripts, and this also applies to what goes on in the bedroom. Dr. Sarah Hunter Murray, my guest in episode number 110, shares tips on how to break out of ruts in your sexual relationship.
I think my biggest thing, especially, I mean, as a therapist, is don't assume, like, really ask and talk and share. And just because we tried something earlier on, maybe it doesn't work for us. Maybe as our bodies change or our lives change, we want to kind of switch things up. So, what I mean by that is, I work with a lot of people who would have a hard time telling their partner, for example, that there's a certain sexual position that they used to really like doing that no longer is working. Or they may have perhaps even faked having an orgasm or something along those lines earlier on. And now they don't know how to kind of break out of that pattern or habit because they don't want to
Because
offend.
been so busy managing their feelings, another person's
Yes,
feelings.
exactly.
Right. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And so to me, like just communication, communication, communication. But it's just this idea like our sexual pleasure, I think, is so important. And feeling open to describing that and being open to asking our partner, like, is this working for you? Or I know we've been kind of, it's been a few years since we've maybe even talked about our sex life. Like what's your favorite part or what's the best memory you have of our sex together? What was going on at that time? Like that's one of my favorite questions to ask clients is tell me about one of the best times that you've had sex. And, the things that we can learn from that, like, you know, we were on vacation. Okay, so you're feeling relaxed. How do we pull that into our, experiences again? Because we can't feel as relaxed on vacation, but are there ways that we can kind of take advantage of feeling a little bit more like, can we light a candle? Or maybe if the kids have a babysitter, or, do we feel more relaxed like on weekends versus weekdays? We kind of just carved out this special time for ourselves, or we had a really long, meaningful conversation first, just really understanding those contextual things. And they can change, leaving space for that. But also, just actually, while we're being sexually intimate, if there's things that are working, actually, I don't really like the way that your tongue is doing this, or your fingers are doing that, or the pressure of your body here. Like, it can be really hard because we're worried that our partner's going to maybe take it offensively, or they're going to feel like defensive about it. And that's the last thing that we want to do in a sexual experience. But I would say
Uh-huh.
more that we can kind of gently, positively reinforce, especially, or at least ask those questions. I think it gives us a better chance of actually increasing our pleasure, ideally, which can also have this positive effect on our desire. We're more likely to want to have sex that's good sex. So if there's any
Right,
part
right.
wanting to kind of increase our desire or help our partner experience more desire, let's make sure the sex that we're having is as good as it can be. And there's no one size fits all for that, right? It's like, people talk about being sexually skilled. They're like, okay, sexually skilled with that partner in that situation, right? It's not like one
Uh-huh.
skill, will, magically work for every relationship. So,
Right.
so yeah, so I hope I answered your question, but I was like, anything that's in the realm of communicate versus assuming, I think is a huge win for a relationship.
Leanne and Jeff Austin are a wonderful couple that experienced a lot of growth in their sexual relationship. They shared their sextimony with me in episode number 107 about how they got from where they were to where they are now. Leanne then shares this great black belt sex tip.
I say be adventurous. Like
I love
I yeah, like I did some lap dancing at the retreat I went to, and I just got home right before this call down from a pole dancing class. I'm like, I found one in the area and like go do fun things. And I can't wait to show Jeff my pole dancing video. I
Awesome.
mean, like
Yeah.
just being open to trying new things. And it's okay if you don't like them. You don't have to do them if you don't like them, but being open to trying different things, that's my advice.
Dr. Dave Schramm runs the Marriage Enrichment Program at the Utah State University Extension Office. He's also on a lot of government councils in the state of Utah, all for promoting stronger marriages. Besides being really funny and a gifted public speaker, he also has a lot of insights he shares on how to build a great sex life in episode number 106. And here is his tip.
You know what? I think uh, honestly, it has to be, and this may sound a little bit weird, but okay, for men, it has to be about her. You have to totally turn outward. Okay, now this may sound weird. For women, it's all about you in a way. Okay, now don't jump on me. Don't get after
I
me.
agree 100%. Yeah.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
because if a woman, again, I'm not a woman, but I've listened to a lot of podcasts, read a lot of things, talked to a lot of people. If they are certainly, focused, or if they're distracted or whatever, if it's just on you, then it's really hard for them to feel what they need to feel, to get in the zone, to get in the mood. But if they honestly are paying more attention to themselves and letting go, and if a man is being able to pay attention to and listen to and respond to her and not himself, that in my mind leads to better connection. And so it's not necessarily both focusing on each other. And there are times when you need to do that. So don't I hope listeners aren't like, oh, I don't know. But honestly, women often have to focus more on them as men focus on them. Does that make sense? Or do you have any
Yeah.
kickback on
And
that?
that's backed up by what Dr. Esther Perel, who's a sex researcher, talks about how female
Okay.
sexuality is inherently narcissistic.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But if
Right.
and you see it in Latin dances, right? Like
Mm,
really these romantic dances. She's the one dressed up pretty. She has a pretty hair, the more colorful dress. He's more conservatively dressed. And he's more in pursuit of her. Like the attention's always on her in these
yes.
dances. And it's about this dance, and it really revolves around her. And
Yes.
I think that's something inherent about male and female sexuality. There's a beauty in both. And so you bring that to the bedroom, and it's okay for him to be really focused on her and her to be focused on herself, like what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, good, good. Yeah, I'm glad that makes sense, because often I don't put it in a way and it's like, wait a minute, that's selfish or whatever. But you said it perfectly, that it is. There's give and take, and there's times, that sexual intimacy, that life, that process, that kind of that dance, it evolves, it changes over time, and so that communication, make sure that we're open and feeling, and women shouldn't feel like they can't talk about it, that they can't share, that it's not their job just to please their man or those kinds of things. So anyway, those are a few tips that I hope will be helpful.
My guest, Natalie Wilton, specializes in sex therapy for the elderly. Quite a niche, isn't it? She's worked with couples that have had extraordinary sex lives across 50, 60, and even 70 years of marriage. She shares what she's seen as one of the keys to building a great sex life. And you can get the full story from episode number 136. But this is what she says. What things should we be doing now so to set us up for great success for a very long-term, wonderful, and productive sex life?
You need to know yourself. You sort of research yourself. You are responsible for what you love about sex and what feels good. You are responsible for knowing that and sharing that with your partner. So you need to be able to bring that to the table. So always be exploring, always be willing to try something new, always be willing to sort of redefine what feels good, and be open to your partner doing that too. Be willing to work together on that, and don't see sex as an all or nothing state. It's something that's constantly evolving and redefining. I would say is the one big thing that you can do. And I think the other big tip too that I would give people, because desire across all of the lifespan, desire is always one of the things that people bring up as an issue. I just don't have the same level of desire, or our relationship was really exciting at the beginning and now it's not. And we sometimes fall into the trap of believing of this, like, again, this kind of movie belief that this spontaneous, like movie
Uh-huh.
wonderful we came together sex thing that
Uh-huh.
happens. And that's not really real, right? And if you think about it, even in your early relationships, when you think
Uh-huh.
about like, okay, what did you do when you first started dating somebody? You took a lot of time in the bathroom. You prepped yourself. You made sure you were looking good and looking your best and feeling your best. And you set the scene and set the stage and made a plan and all those good things that you did to make those what seemed like it was really spontaneous sex when you were in your early part of your relationship, you did a whole lot to do that. So keep doing a whole lot to make it really good. Make sex worth wanting is really, I guess, what my number one black belt tip
That's
is.
good. My friend Melanie Studley has been a guest on my podcast more than once because of her wisdom and wit. She was recently on our show for episode number 131. Her black belt sex tip might seem really basic at first, but it's actually something that is really black belt level. It is, can you stay consistent over a long period of time? This is what she says.
Most people just
Mhm.
never even think like there should be a standard in your marriage, even if it's something that feels minor to be like we go to bed at the same time and we get up at the same time. That
Mhm.
is not minor at all. Doing that over the course of 40 years is transformative for a
Mhm.
relationship, and I think it's foundational for a healthy relationship. But yeah, I think consistency, just people underestimate the power of showing up daily for a
Mhm.
marriage, and they overestimate what it will be like. Oh, we'll just go on a really great vacation. Like, no, that's cool sometimes, but
Uh-huh.
keep your consistent daily stuff, and that's the game changer, you know?
Mhm. Or consistently go on vacation.
Very I like that. I like that twist.
Very good. Consistency is so key because it creates
Mhm.
systems. And once you have
Yes.
systems, then over time, it,
Mhm.
it helps you form those healthy habits. Alex and Katie are the founders of Every Love Intimates, a fantastic lingerie brand with classy styles and great date night ideas. They share this black belt tip on episode number 130.
I would say one thing that we have found, especially after we have one son and a little girl on the way, is scheduling time to be intimate. I think that
Uh-huh.
helped me a lot as the husband with the higher drive, just to know that it's coming. And yeah, I would say scheduling or at least having a plan as to how you're gonna initiate or when you can initiate, just with how busy life
Yeah.
is right now. And I feel like so many people are in that same boat. So I would say scheduling would be mine.
Yeah. And then I would probably say check in and find something new that the person is thinking of. Because especially like you said, they've been married a long time, they've got their routine down, it's going really well. It can always get better. So on top of, yeah, I feel like scheduling huge. That changed everything for us because I kind of needed to prepare and enjoy like the day of foreplay to feel really great about the night. And so that's been good for us. But then also once you're in that routine, it can get repetitive. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means it's repetitive. So if you can check in, what he wanted 3 years ago might be different than what he wants right now,
Uh-huh.
and what he thinks of tomorrow, right? So finding new things to try or finding things that are on their mind that we may not have done or we did 2 years ago that we totally forgot about. Just talking about it and checking in what's still working, what's not working anymore, what's something new we can try. That I feel like is a huge game changer. Once we started openly talking about
Yeah.
what we liked. Oh, and
Yeah.
during
Yes.
that, like, really does it for him. If
Yeah.
you're in the middle of it and you share what you like and what's going well, I feel like
It's a
that
huge turn on.
oh, yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's a huge turn on. It's a confidence booster. It gets everything going even more. So that would be mine.
Episode number 137 was titled Blowjobs Aren't Just for Husbands. Our guest, Danielle Savory, who's also a fellow sex and marriage coach, talks about how, with the right mindset, women can experience just as much pleasure themselves while giving pleasure to their husbands. And this principle applies to both husbands giving pleasure to their wives also. Then she shares this golden nugget.
I think that communication is really important. Don't get me wrong. We should
Uh-huh.
always consent. We should always have communication. That's like hands down, of course.
Uh-huh.
And that being said, sometimes we want to lean into something without telling our partner, like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be doing this, this, and this, and this. Like, are you okay with that?
Uh-huh.
I think more is the communication that we have in general around our sex life. Like, how would you like me to tell you that I don't really like that? Or I'm not really sure? Or how would you like me to bring up a new idea? Should we just try it? Like, having that outside gives you the permission then to, go forward or do something a little bit more, ask for something.
Mhm.
So I think that is a huge part of it, is like the communication agreement that you have, not necessarily during, but leading up to, so that you're not surprised, or if your partner really doesn't like what you're doing, they feel safe to be able to express that to you and vice versa without hurting anybody's feelings.
That's good. That's necessary for all aspects of sex too.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
that trust and that, we're on the same team here and we're
Yes.
we're working together to build a great sexual relationship we both want to participate in. My friend Monica Tanner is all about making sex fun and connecting. In episode number 139, she has great ideas on how to keep your marriage from falling into a rut. This is what she says.
If you've been married for a really long time, sometimes you fall into a rut, we go out to dinner, we go see a movie, we come home,
Right. Uh-huh.
whatever. So I think role play is really fun, but if you're a little bit anxious about that, it's just like if you can channel the fun, flirty energy by acting like it's the first time that you're
Uh-huh.
meeting,
Uh-huh.
it's like I am having so much fun with that. So, like, we go to a restaurant, maybe that has a bar or, has a waiting area, and you just greet each other as if it's the first time you've ever met, like, "Hey, how are you?" Like, and then you choose to have dinner together like you haven't been married for 25 years, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Right.
I think that's really fun, and then if you can bring in some aspects of role play, like, I act like I'm a traveling nurse or something, and my husband is a surgeon and whatever, like,
Uh-huh. Right.
you
Uh-huh.
kind of bring in these elements of something a little bit different, something a little bit new, that kind of I think that kind of creative energy translates really well into the bedroom.
That's right. You can get like a new outfit just for the date, wear a new scent.
Yeah.
Like there's so many fun ways you can like go with that. That's
Absolutely,
good.
absolutely, yes, and that novelty, yes, like, if you feel sick, that's everything, right? So, definitely new shoes, new outfit, new lingerie underneath your clothes, all of that is so much fun.
It's good. Any other tips to make date night more creative and fun to get you out of that rut?
There's this huge debate about, like, scheduling sex, and I am a bigger proponent of scheduling date night and then letting sex happen naturally than scheduling sex specifically. So,
Uh-huh.
I think if you just make sure that you're doing everything for date night where you have enough energy for sex afterwards is really important. So that means putting it on the schedule. That means planning it in advance. That means building up anticipation. That means knowing what you're doing so that if you're going to be out late, you take a nap before or manage what time you go to bed leading up to date night, right? So if you make date night really really a priority and you're planning it in and planning for it, then you'll look forward to the sexual encounter afterwards. So I think that's so, so, so important.
Amy Gianni is a marriage therapist and coach. She's experienced working with couples and individuals to help them thrive in their relationships. This is an excerpt of her black belt sex tip she shared on episode number 140.
I think emotionally speaking, the more that you're willing to see your partner, to know what they like, care enough to find out what do they like? How do they want to be loved sexually? And then again, it's choice, right? It's choosing to love them that way because you want to be close to them, because you care about them. I think that makes such a difference in a sexual relationship. And then also just keeping the door open for possibility, right? Having a little bit of mystery or excitement or newness, the playfulness,
Uh-huh.
adventurous, being open for that, right? And always being willing to go into it together. Like I think of sex as like an adult playground where it's like you're side by side and it's like, hey, do you want to go in there? Do you want to go like on the swing? Like, you want to go play? Let's
Uh-huh.
go. Get excited. You're like, yes, let's go. Right. We're up for the adventure together, whatever that is.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So get a swing. That's what I'm hearing
Yeah,
from
there we
you.
go. Get us and a slide.
Very good. Cody Sanders, married over 31 years, shares these great black belt sex tips from episode number 141.
We are big flirt. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's is important for me. Like, I'm not all about like, oh, we live these separate lives and then, oh, it's Saturday night. Let's, get it on. I'm like, no, it's something that's like we're constantly flirting with each other, texting, or when we are together, we're very much about like physical touch. Both of us have that as one of our love languages, and understanding that love
Uh-huh.
language stuff is so helpful as well. But also understanding that in marriage, you are going to have like seasons, right? You're going to have seasons, and don't get so frustrated if it's feeling like it's a season where maybe there's a little bit of a drought there. Luckily for us, I think we enjoy sex so much that we, haven't had a huge drought. Still, there's times that we're just tired, and we'll have a week where, nothing happens. But it doesn't mean that we don't love each other, that we're not attracted to each other. We just find ways to connect in so many other ways. I'm huge also about communication. And this is probably really boring, but when you've been married 31 years, I think sometimes you think you know everything about each other. There's always new stuff to learn because we're always evolving. And so I think it's very helpful for us to have like things that we are individually interested in, and then coming together and wanting to learn and then learn together. We are open, we try new things. We're just really open.
Doctors Cliff and Joyce Penner were fantastic guests in episode number 145. They taught me that too many times one person in the marriage is too fixated on trying to get their spouse fixed or to control their spouse's outcome in a sexual encounter. And then some couples have the opposite problem, where there's not enough attention given to the other spouse's sexual experience. So here's their black belt sex tip.
So that's why Paul says, if you can love your wife like this, you're really just doing yourself a favor because it'll make you feel good
Ah.
and be happy.
But
So it
it's
isn't,
sacrifice, it's serving.
but it isn't just about the man. Yes, a man enjoys an ejaculation. That's standard. But unless the woman is enjoying it, it's not complete. It's not fulfilling. And so
And
that's
most men feel that, but then they try so hard to fix her so she will enjoy it as much as he is. But in the trying to fix her, she feels worse about herself. So then she can't really do it. So if he just loves her where she is and lets her lead and lets her teach him about herself and listen to her own body, that be the pace and how they continue.
so the biblical model from the way we see it is the man really listens to the woman and the woman really listens to herself.
She sets the pace and he rides the waves with her, and then really they both enjoy it and they're both happy.
Dr. Josh Savage, in episode number 147, talked about the importance of being fully honest in your sexual relationship, plus how anxiety often gets in the way of intimate, passionate sex. He then shares this black belt sex tip.
The best approach I found is yes, be honest, state your desires, things like that. But the more you get hyper focused, the more you get really fixated, shaming of yourself or your partner, just things like that. It just tends to compound the issue even worse. And so that's kind of my tip there is just play it cool, which I know is easier said than done a lot of times. And
Uh-huh.
and I've definitely seen a lot where people kind of get in these negative
Cycles.
a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
And it's difficult to say. So I never try to tell that to a patient, but yeah, that's really kind of the zone that I felt. Ideally, right, our sexual relationship, our relationship to sex shouldn't be one of anxiety, right? And it's
Yeah.
not a snap of the finger, right? You can't just say that to someone, but really I think that's the ultimate place where, our sexuality is the most enjoyable when it's a place of play, a place of fun, you know. Obviously there's some serious topics around it, but ultimately I think the most enjoyable, pleasurable expression of it is when there's not huge amounts of anxiety about it, and which definitely, puts pressure, I think, on both partners to grow sometimes, right? Because we always don't see things. We always want, sometimes we want to try things different that the other partner might not, right?
Right, right. That's normal. If that's you in your marriage, congratulations, you're normal.
Exactly, exactly, for sure. But I think that's ultimately when when I found that things work the best is when anxiety is.
And you can chill out a bit. Just
Yeah,
chill a
exactly.
little bit.
Yeah,
Enjoy this.
yeah, exactly.
Don't be so OCD about it.
Yeah, make it a place of play, make it a place of fun.
Dr. Laurie Watson, a sex therapist and host of the Foreplay Radio podcast, taught me a lot about the struggles of being the one with a higher desire for sex in the marriage, especially if you think you're going against a social norm, such as in her case, where she's the woman in her marriage with the higher desire for sex and is the pursuer in her relationship. She was our guest in last week's podcast, episode number 149. I asked her for her black belt sex tip, and this is what she shared, which is really good advice, by the way. I hope everyone listens to it.
Well, I certainly think using a vibrator, um,
Uh-huh.
sometimes during sexual intercourse, can feel really great for couples. It kind of ensures for orgasm. And I think men who are having trouble with erections or premature ejaculation are very anxious that they will fail, they will not perform, she will not climax, and then he's a total failure. So a
Right.
vibrator is kind of a saving grace. It's certainly great for Thursday sex. And, it might be great for Saturday night sex too, but
Uh-huh.
there's
Uh-huh.
nothing wrong with that to kind of add, a sense of physiological speeding up of her slower arousal cycle so that they kind of match a little bit better. Go for it. Maybe that feels weird to you or you shouldn't need that, but, it can be fun. It can kind of take some of the pressure off the penis. It can also, be enjoyable. And certainly you want to teach your partner how to touch you if you're a woman. Um,
Uh-huh.
so sometimes this sort of shortens that arousal period and gets you kind of to the pleasure part of touching faster.
Amber A. Price taught me how important it is to be authentic with our spouse in order to build an intimate relationship. And this was her black belt sex tip that she shared in episode number 133.
I guess my last tip would just be that reminder that it's challenging, but it's supposed to be challenging and you can grow through it and develop connection as you work together through it. Give yourself grace, be patient with the process, and just have fun and enjoy the journey.
Well, there you have it. A black belt sex tip roundup from the last 50 episodes. If I could summarize what I've learned over the last 50 episodes, it's that great sex and great intimacy go together hand in hand. By learning how to build a close, full-hearted relationship, you open the door to fulfilling and full-hearted sex. And it also works in the opposite direction, too. Great sex can also lead to a full-hearted relationship. I hope you and your spouse are blessed from this podcast. Now, it's time for you to take courageous action and implement these things in your marriage today. So, go check out the Intimately Us app for our Sextember Challenge. Sign up for our retreat, or try marriage coaching with me and my team to level up the intimacy in your marriage today. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in accelerating growth in your marriage, either sexually, emotionally, or spiritually, I want to invite you to work with me in my affordable coaching program called Next Level. More information about Next Level and my fun and sexy apps for couples are available at getyourmarriageon.com. Please also don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And be sure to tell your married friends. I promise, they will thank you for life. Now go get your marriage on.